Anyone else? No? No other questions on this? Right. Let's go, why don't we go through, do you want Catherine? Thank you both. Thanks, Jim and John.
Okay.
So just before you start, so just for the councillors who've joined us, and it may seem that we, just reminding people that we can't debate, discuss, preempt what's going to be coming our way. So if I did seem a little bit kind of curt, that's why. So we're just going to have a quick little update on process. Thanks, Penny.
So since the last committee, we've been thinking of ways how to make information available to you as a committee about the time frame. So we are putting together what we're calling a handy sheet, which will give you all the timeline from now until when you make a decision, indicating to you when we will be getting information from the panel, when we'll be having briefings, when are the meetings to make the decisions, just so you've got that information if people ask you questions. And we'll also attach to it some information that Catherine will talk about briefly about your role going forward. One of the things we wanted to update you on today was the fact that this Friday is the last hearing day for the Independent Hearings Panel. As John has indicated, they completed the volcanic view shafts hearings this week, and on Friday it's a general wash-up 001 hearing, which is really to those people who put in submissions against the whole plan and some more general technical process issues. After that, the council has been asked to provide a written closing statement, just wrapping up our position on the zoning and precincts, and that will be delivered next week. But it really is just reiterating the council's position that we took into the hearings. It is not to introduce any new topics or issues. And because of that, the panel through the judge has indicated to us that they are on track to deliver their recommendations on the 22nd of July. They've made it very clear that in their minds they see no need to request of the Minister an extension of that time frame. So I think it's just important to know that really we are keeping to the legislative requirement of delivering a decision within the year, because the hearings are completed on time and on track. And because of that, there are some things that you as committee members and governing body members and IMSB members need to be aware of going forward as we enter into what is more the deliberation part of the panel, but also in terms of your decision making as we get the recommendations in July. So I'll just hand it over to Catherine and she just can talk you through that.
Before we do, Madam Chair, can I just start? Penny's just pointed out that the panel see no reason to ask for an extension. And it's very complex, it's hugely complex, and it's a huge ask for us to make all the decisions to accept or reject prior to the 29th of September. If at some stage it looks as if we can't meet that deadline, because I presume that will be the deadline, the 29th of September, what would be the process going forward? Would we at that point say, hey, listen, we'll go to the government, we can't make a decision on all the issues before us? Would we then ask for an extension?
So the legislation as written requires the council to make its decision within 20 working days of receiving the recommendations of the panel. It does make a provision for us to request of the Minister a further 20 working days, but after that there is no provision for us for any more extensions. I don't think it's explicit in the legislation what happens next, but I suspect it then would go to the Minister to make the decisions on behalf of the council, but Catherine might have a better view of that.
So the timeline that you'll be getting will make it clear that the 20 working days for decision-making after receipt of the recommendations will fall by 19 August. And so that's the intention is to do what we can to assist you to be in decision-making mode by that, to have completed things by that time. As Penny said, there's a further legislative provision, but only for a 20 working day extension, which would take you to the end of September. So there's no legislative provision for a further extension, so no power of the minister to legally grant an extension beyond that. So any change would require a legislative amendment.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, councillors, this is why this is such a critical time. We have set this time aside to talk about the topics that you have identified, Councillor Quacks, as individual councillors that are of critical importance. So this is our time, and the staff have put, I think they're doing this really well. This is the issue, this is what happened during the process, this is what we've reached. So this is our time to unpack that. Then we'll get the recommendations that we'll discuss on these issues. And, I know it feels huge, but it has to be doable. And if we put the time in now to getting very clear on each of these issues, then simply it is, what do the recommendations say on each of these issues? The staff will put the background work together, and then we need to bite the bullet and get on with it. We'd have to be on, something cataclysmic would need to happen for us to decide to want to take it longer. I'd be struggling to see why you would.
Yeah, the reason why I asked the question is simply because we've heard a diverse range of views around here over the last couple of sessions that we've had on this, and so it sort of makes me wonder if we can actually do it within that time, whether it's doable within that time frame. That's the reason for asking that question.
No, I think it's entirely valid, and this is our time as a council to work out how we actually move forward with this. And, we will have the time over the next couple of months to be working some of this through. How do we break this down into bite-sized pieces? Are we committed for Auckland to actually doing the right thing and getting a unitary plan? How do we deal with the complexities and the political angle of this? But I think if we set our minds to what Auckland expects us to do, which is to land a unitary plan so they can get on and build Auckland, then we just have to put the hours in and the work in to get it done. And we have to park politics while we do it. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. Councillor Casey.
Well, in a hearing you have to have a site visit. Did the independent hearings panel have to visit some or all of the sites that were under discussion?
I would have to ask the panel office that, Councillor Casey. I do know that at the beginning of their term as a panel, they spent a considerable amount of time driving around Auckland, right from TRA in the north right down to, I think they also went out to the Whetū Peninsula and out that way, just so that all the panel members were very clear on what the different parts of Auckland were, because as you'll be aware, there's a couple that don't live permanently in Auckland. I will check with the office and get back to you what they've done since then in terms of the more site-specific issues that have been raised. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, right. Catherine.
The conclusion of the formal hearings process before the panel is a very important milestone for council as the decision maker and waiting as the ultimate decision maker in relation to the plan. The reason I bring this to your attention and what will come to you with the information that Penny's outlined will be circulated shortly to you is the need to take great care on the extent to which you engage in any discussions with the community or others in relation to the proposed unitary plan. The reason for this is that there is an express prohibition in the legislation on council as a decision maker, that it says that council must not consider any submission or other evidence that was not made available to the hearings panel. So the conclusion of the panel's process puts a ring fence around what is relevant to your decision making, and it's therefore very important that you're not engaging with other groups who might be wanting to put different information to you, which you will have to put aside for the purpose of decision making, and that obviously becomes quite difficult. So the easiest thing for you will be to have some handy phrases that you'll be able to use to indicate to people that you cannot participate in discussions, and so that's what we're proposing to circulate to you.
And it's not yes.
Yeah. I just want to ask a question around that.
Conflict.
Is it a matter of not engaging with people or not forming an opinion that you would, that you could be shown to have a bias during the actual discussion that we're going to have when we get a report back from the panel? Is it more about having not a formed opinion rather than not speaking to them? Because I think it will be extraordinarily difficult for us not to engage, especially leading up to an election, not to engage with ratepayers associations and others who may have put in submissions. Isn't it more about not forming an opinion and not bringing a bias to the hearings?
No, it's absolutely about both. So it is quite critical that all the decision makers are seen to have retained an open mind as they lead up to their decision-making time. But it's also very important that you're not allowing people to articulate views to you on what council should do as the decision maker. So it's about not soliciting views of what people think about the unitary plan, and especially once the recommendations become public, not engaging in that discussion with people on what their views might be as to what council as a decision maker should do. But in terms of the bias, it's clearly about not responding positively or negatively to comments that people might make to you, because of course you can't necessarily control what people might say to you, but you can control the response and the clarity with which you're not engaging with their particular views. I agree it will be a difficult period. But
It's hugely difficult in a period leading up to an election, I would suggest, not to engage and with groups or individuals. It's extraordinarily difficult.
I understand that, but the position as a matter of law is extremely clear in terms of what you must not take into account. If you want to have the ultimate decisions that come out of this council free from the risk of a challenge, you know, that is a very careful carriage through this process that you will need to bring, which is, you know, the purpose here is to signal that, and it will be followed by more concrete information for you. I can assure you that there is very clear case law in this space, and particularly arising out of a minister's decision in relation to the Whangamata Marina, where the minister had a 20 working day period, could only take into account matters that were before the Environment Court, subject to an exception which doesn't apply in our case. The minister attended you know, a meeting in the community, had particular views about aspects, and the court, you know, in its oversight jurisdiction, went right in there and set the decision aside. And that's, of course, what we want to be very careful about, avoiding the risk of that after we've gone through, as you say, you know, a difficult decision-making process with complex matters to be weighed. So it's about how we as staff help you safely land a judicial review-proof decision.
Was that issue, though, about that the minister met the group, was actually to discuss that issue rather than, say, an annual general meeting of the local ratepayers, where something may crop up? I think there's a distinction there, is there not?
Yeah, can you paint a few scenarios?
I think
for
what
us
we
that-
might need to do, and I'm just listening to councillor Quicks, I think whether we can do that all now, but I think we need to keep talking about this, because I think the scenario thing is a really good idea. So I was in Ellerslie today, talking to 200 women of Auckland. The unitary plan came up. I'm really clear. You know, there are some things that I've been saying for the last 20 years that it's going to be very hard to unsay now around urban containment and urban design. However, there's a point at which it crosses into starting to talk about detail of unitary plans. So I think that's a really good idea, Councillor Crum. I think we might work up some scenarios maybe for the next discussion. It's kind of err on the side of caution for the moment, and then let's look at what those scenarios look like, because it is kind of bonkers. You know, we're out there in the real world. You can't pretend that the unitary plan doesn't exist.